Hey everybody, Rob B here with Rob D, and you are listening to the Property Podcast. We have a lot of positive news to bring you, but then we shake it all up with some what seems to be shocking news from nationwide, and wrapping up with insights of the rich and how they invest in property.
Welcome to the Property Podcast. Thank you for joining us. We spend our days advising a multi-million-pound property fund and investing in hundreds of properties every year on behalf of our clients. And this is a show where we bring you the knowledge that we've gained from doing that for free. This is our monthly market update episode where we bring you up to speed with everything that's going on in the world of property. So let's get straight into it.
Rob, let's start with inflation, because there's so much going on in the world right now in normal world news that people may have missed this, but for me this is big news when it comes to our economy. UK inflation fell to 3.4% in February. Now that's the lowest it's been for 2.5 years, but what's really important here is that it was lower than forecast. And when we have a forecast, when it moves one way or the other, that's news. It's something that wasn't expected. And this is a good thing. This has moved in a way that surprised people in a good way. Inflation is on its way down. Hopefully this isn't a blip, because if this continues to happen, we can then expect interest rates to follow in the not too distant future.
That's right. 3.4% is a lot lower than we've become used to, even though it is still above target. So the question now is shaving off that last 1.5% or so going to be really hard? There are people who believe that that's the tricky bit, actually kind of getting rid of the last of this inflation. It's going to be harder to stamp out than you might think. Or is it actually going to absolutely crater from here? There is some evidence, especially if you look at the money supply and you believe that that is a big determinant of inflation, that in fact inflation is going to fall very rapidly below target from here, and the Bank of England are going to have to start making some significant cuts. So which of those ends up being true, we'll find out over probably the next 6 months or so. But Andrew Bailey, Governor of the Bank of England, was, after the last Bank of England meeting, probably the most direct he's been yet in talking about the Bank of England's plans, saying that rate cuts are on the way. That was his quote. But is that going to mean 0.5% shaved off over the course of the year? Or is it going to mean something more? We don't know. But Rob, this belief that rates are going to come down in the future already is affecting what it's like for us as investors today, because this is already finding its way into the pricing of mortgages.
It is. Just a few days after this news broke, the Mortgage Works, one of the biggest lenders in the world of buy-to-let, reduced rates on a number of their buy-to-let and limited company products by up to 0.4%, which is huge. You can now get a 5-year fix, a mortgage for less than 4% at 3.99. It's really good to see products now below 4%. And as we've said, we expect this to continue. This isn't what we expect to see the best you can get from now on in. We expect these rates to fall further. We will see. But Rob, we love the positive news. Last year, we didn't have as much as this. In fact, you probably could say in the second half of last year, we probably didn't have as much as we've covered in the first few minutes today. So we'll take it, we'll enjoy it, and we'll embrace those lower rates that are heading our way.
We will. And of course, how people feel about mortgages has a huge impact on housing market activity and house prices. And there's a few pieces of data out this month that give us some insight into what's going on there. So the outlier probably is Nationwide, which reports a very slight fall in house prices in March, down 0.2%. Now, over a single month and something of that size, 0.2% doesn't really mean anything, and that's not just us trying to talk things up. We say the same when it's up by 0.2% or something like that. So that's effectively nothing, but still looks a bit strange in the context of some of the other data we've got, which is that Rightmove, which looks at asking prices, so a bit earlier in the process, is showing that asking prices increased by 1.5% in March. March is normally a good month. The average is 1%, but this time up by 1.5%. And a 13% increase in the number of agreed sales compared to this time last year. So again, this feeling around mortgages like the worst is behind us, prices are at least stable or going to come down, is getting the market moving again. And that's also reflected in the monthly survey from RICS, who send out a survey to their members, who are estate agents, surveyors, valuers, and they are feeling more positive, or correctly probably less negative, than they have done in a couple of years. And Rob, all of this seems to be feeding through to the person on the street, because ultimately this is what the housing market is all about. It's about first-time buyers being able to make the move or wanting to make the move. It's about people making the decision to move house, and it's about investors like us deciding whether to make moves into the market or not. And sentiment has been really pretty negative for the last couple of years now. But all this data, this suggestion that things have stabilized and are picking up, seems to be filtering down to the decisions people are making. And people are making plans, Rob.
They are. And this is why I love the podcast, because we were talking about this at the beginning of the year, how, in our opinion, sentiment was improved. And that's our interactions in the business world and interactions in the property world. And just how people are making decisions and just talking about the world they live in. But that's now being reflected in data, and that's what this survey shows, is that 42% of potential home buyers are now speeding up their plans to get active in the market. That's a big jump, and it's no surprise to you as a listener if you listen in each week, but the fact it's now coming out in hard data is really interesting, and that's what we aim to do here, is keep you ahead of the curve so you can make decisions ahead of the crowd. It's interesting, Rob, because it talks here about how property prices in London have been the most affordable they've been in almost a decade. Now, people don't like that type of comment. People think, oh, wait, property prices are at all-time highs, but they're not. And that's why you should really watch the video that Rob's put out on our YouTube channel, Property Hub UK, which is titled on the lines of why you should buy a property right now. And it's not a sales pitch about why you should just buy as much property as possible. It's a really thought through piece, which includes the fact that property prices are cheaper than they have been in the last 10 years. But most people don't see it that way because they don't look at real values. They just look at the number. But we have to take into account inflation. And the fact that sentiment is improving even strengthens the argument further. But it's a really, really good video. I watched it through start to finish, and I get plenty of Rob D in my life. So I tell you, that tells you how good that video is, that I could watch even more of Rob in my own time. It's a really good one.
I hope you gave it a like for the algorithm.
I did give it a like, Rob.
Glad to hear it. Well, something that is not going to be getting many likes from investors is more lettings news from Scotland, where there's been talk for a long time about proper rent controls. They've been doing some form of temporary rent controls over the last few years, but they wanted to make it permanent. That legislation has now been published, and yeah, they are proper rent controls. So the idea is, if this makes it through the Scottish Parliament, which it needs to do before it becomes law, it won't apply at a national level, but it will give local authorities the ability to cap rents. And that cap can be as low as 0, i.e. no rent increases at all. It can be for as long as 5 years. And it applies both within a tenancy and, critically, between tenancies as well. That's the big difference from the form of rent control that's been in place up until now. So as a Scottish landlord, you could be in the position of having your rent today, not being able to increase that rent at all for 5 years. Whatever happens with demand, whatever happens with inflation, your rent is what it is. So that to me seems pretty definitive. What do the rental activists pressure groups think? Well, Generation Rent came out and said that this proposal doesn't go far enough. I don't know what far enough looks like for them, Rob, but to anyone who's investing in Scotland, that's going to feel pretty far.
It will, and this is reflected in a news report from Zoopla, where they've put their monthly market report out. Now, we touched on this on the news story last week, but it comes as no shock that the highest rental growth over the last year is in Scotland, and the lowest rental inflation that we've seen is in London, which was at 15% a year ago, and it's now at 5%. So growth has fallen from 15 to 5. That's a huge fall. The UK average now is down to 7.8 from 11% a year ago. And that slowdown in inflation in the London market is reflected in a news story from Foxtons. Foxtons are a huge agency in London and the South East, where they are reporting a normalisation in the property market. And that is because supply and demand is changing. New instructions are up by 20% year on year, while demand has fallen a bit, which is causing that stabilisation in rental prices in London, which I'm sure for all those people who want to rent in London is very welcome news.
Yeah, exactly. And across the country, I think having rents under control is good for everyone. It might seem nice as a property investor when you've got rental growth of double digits and people beating down your door. But not only is that not desirable at a broader society kind of level, if things stayed that way, some measures would come in to restrict it and things wouldn't work out well. So the fact that the rental market is moderating but is still strong, I think is good news. It's kind of amazing that annual rental inflation is now across the country at 7.8%, which is the lowest it's been for 2 years, which tells you something about what the last couple of years has been like. Let's move on to briefly talk about more politics and the rental reform bill, which is now coming up to its birthday. It's been nearly a year since it had its first reading in Parliament. It's been the subject of much arguing and debate since then. And now apparently Michael Gove is going to be bringing it back to the House of Commons later this month. And the good news from an investor point of view is that according to a leaked letter, when it does come back, it's going to have some landlord-friendly changes to it. So apparently tenants aren't going to be able to end a contract within the first 6 months. You might remember that previously they'd be able to move in and immediately give notice on day one, which we said was a bit silly. And this business of whether the courts need to be ready for it, apparently that is going to be in there. There's going to have to be some kind of statement that the courts are in a fit state to deal with the demand before no-fault evictions are removed. So we'll have to wait and see for all the detail. But of course, we'll bring you an update on that when it happens.
Finally, if you want to be rich, well, do as the rich do, not what they say. And what they're doing right now is investing in property. According to Investec, a poll of high net worth individuals, that's people earning £510,000 or more per annum, found that 77% of them are looking to invest in UK property. That's a staggering amount. That's even higher than I would have predicted. That's a huge amount. I suppose, though, for everything we talk about, it shouldn't come as a shock. And with the market where it is right now, slightly unsettled but showing positive signs, you can understand why such a high percentage are intending to invest. But it shows you that as an asset class, property investment may not be the sexiest one out there because it's not as volatile as some others. It's certainly, at least among the rich, the one to turn to in most economic climates. So if you don't quite earn £510,000 or more yet, well, do as the rich do and continue to invest in property. I'm sure you'll join the club soon. Before we bring you a really cool Hub Extra, it's time for the handshake deal. I'm going to keep it brief. We do these podcasts week in, week out. Over 10 years now, we've never missed a single podcast. In fact, I think we're approaching 11 years, if we haven't already surpassed 11. A long time, basically. We've been going at this a long time. Never missed a week through births, holidays, and yes, even man flu. You may be able to hear in my voice I have man flu. And one of the God-given rights of man flu is telling everybody you have it.
Absolutely right.
So, with that moan in place, come on, guys, share the podcast. We'll still produce it even when we're feeling a little bit poorly and we've got Lemsip at our sides. We'll be there for you in your earbuds each and every week, supporting you at the gym, on your drives, on your walks, wherever you go, we'll be there with you. So share it with people. Let them know the Property Podcast is out there. Leave a review if you don't know that many people. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. However you can find a way to support what we do and get the word out in a meaningful way, then please do it, because we'll keep doing this for you. So if you shake our hand, do a little bit back, we'll be very, very grateful.
That's right. And I'm recording this podcast from a meeting room in Barcelona where even with the air conditioning on, it's really rather too hot for my taste. So we're both suffering to bring this podcast to you. So
You're a horrible human, Rob. You're a horrible human.
Moving swiftly on, let's talk about Hub Extra. This is one of those, maybe everyone except me already knew this, but I didn't. And so maybe there are a couple of other silly people out there who didn't either. So you'll have seen the green bikes across London and across other cities in the UK owned by Lime, the electric bikes that you can hire to get around town a bit more easily. You can hire these through the Uber app, which is what I've always done because I had the app already and it's really convenient. I had never downloaded the actual Lime app because I didn't think it was necessary. But as it turns out, when you book through the Lime app itself, you can get packages that make it a lot cheaper. So you can buy 30 minutes or 60 minutes of time that you can use over something like 1 to 3 days. So if you're going to be making multiple short trips, it works out a lot cheaper because these electric bikes are super convenient, but they are pretty pricey, even for, say, like a 10-minute journey. So if you use Lime, but you don't have the Lime app, don't be silly like me. Put that right. It'll end up being a lot cheaper. And if you don't use those electric bikes at all, and they're in your city, give them a try. It's been an absolute game changer for me. I've got a very nice bike that is just gradually rusting on my balcony because I have no need to use it. It's just so much easier being able to walk outside and pick one up and not have to worry about locking it up and all the rest of it. Absolute game changer.
Yeah, it really is. And especially when you visit cities around Europe. I used the Lime app and bikes in Lisbon last year, and it's just a great way to get around. So it's a great way to explore as well. So do check the app out and do try electric bikes or scooters if you haven't yet, especially when you travel. You'll have a lot of fun.
Okay, so that is us done for this week. Hope you enjoyed your monthly news roundup. And if you want more news in your life, well, hopefully you're already subscribed to our Property Pulse newsletter because you'll be getting that tomorrow, Friday morning. If you're not, then go to propertyhub.net/pulse to put that right. And in one way or another, we hope you'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.